Hey, what's up, everyone? It's officially October, so you know what that means, right?
Ghosts, monsters, horror, and all that other supernatural stuff.
I'm here with Pat, and this month I'm going to be doing reviews, discussions, maybe even an entertainment road trip or two, all related to the genre of horror. Although I did do a review for season 3 a little while back, I never really did an in-depth look at the first season or two of Stranger Things. So, of course, what are we going to be talking about today?
Season 1 of Stranger Things.
First off, I have Pat here because I know, dude, you're the hugest Stranger Things fan I know. He's got
just
comics. What did you get?
This is the new one that just came out the other day. This one is Science Camp, takes place during the summer.
Oh, when he's at Camp Nowhere?
Yep, season 3. And then this one takes a little bit after the end of season 3, so it's the furthest.
Says free comic book day on there?
Yeah, but I did have to pay for it. I did not go the free comic book day.
Barnacles. This guy, though, he's such a good friend because he went all the way down to Philly, which is like a half hour away from us, just to get the Stranger Things Upside Down Whopper for him and I.
Yeah, it was like a one-day only thing.
Either way, though, I know he reads all the books. He's got... You have action figures, don't you? You got Funko Pops, right?
Yeah, Funko Pops, yep.
Yeah. And, oh my gosh... Every week I feel like he's getting something new related to Stranger Things, and then I think the latest pickup you had was the Dungeons & Dragons set?
Yeah, it's a starter set based on the adventure that they're doing in Season 1.
And I'm not a big fan of D&D, but if Pat's got it, I need to get on his level. So to set it up, I'll let Pat take it away.
Season 1 starts in November of 1983, where scientists in a lab in Hawkins, Indiana, open up a rift to another dimension.
A monster from said alternate dimension escapes and abducts a little boy named Will Byers.
So the first season is all about finding him whilst unlocking the mysteries of this other dimension called the Upside Down.
Now, we'll give you our opinions and whatnot, of course, but first we have to establish the characters. Starting off, Will is the one who gets abducted by the monster.
Mike, Lucas, and Dustin are his friends. They're about 11 or 12, right?
Yeah. They soon realize Will didn't show up for school the next day, and these guys will stop at nothing to find out what happened to him.
The older kids in the show, Nancy, Mike's older sister, dates this douchey guy, Steve the Hare Harrington.
I need to get on his level, man. I miss my longer hair. You had it at one point, too.
Yeah.
Will Byers' older brother, Jonathan, is an aspiring photographer, and him and his family are pretty much just like doing everything they can to stay afloat.
And Barb is a high schooler who feels that she's losing her best friend, Nancy Wheeler, to the wrong crowd.
I feel like there's a lot of people who have all been there. Will's mother, Joyce, played by Winona Ryder. She was in, what do we got? Beetlejuice, one of the live-action Star Trek films. And she's driving herself insane in this show trying to find her son.
Jim Hopper, who formerly worked in New York but returned home to the town of Hawkins, where our show takes place, aids Joyce in the search for Will.
At the same time, a young psychokinetic girl named Eleven escapes the laboratory and assists the gang in trying to find their best friend. Going into it, I didn't have many gripes with the show for the first few episodes. I mean, there was a character I wasn't really interested in too much, but I'll let you go first then.
Characters I didn't like. Barb, she was cute and all, but...
Yeah, what was your kind of disinterest in her?
I mean, part of the fact was the whole Twitter campaign, Justice for Barb. I mean, are you going to make a Justice for insert Game of Thrones character here?
Yeah, Justice for Arya, Justice for,
get it.
Like, whoever.
I get it, like, people's favorite character, but they die, and I'm like, well, that's what happens.
Yeah, I would understand if she was in it for like 7 episodes and then got killed off or something like that.
Definitely, but she like.
Would you be mad if they killed off one of your like favorite characters of the show this season?
I mean, I would be mad, but I'm not going to put #Justice for Mike Wheeler.
For me, probably the one I wasn't interested in too much was Jonathan Byers. Right off the bat, you don't really get to see Jonathan Byers in himself. He's just upset, which is totally understandable because of what happened to Will. But I don't know, he was just too busy at work to keep track of his brother. And also, there's a point in the show where he hears a scream and he goes to investigate it. And it's just some kids playing at a pool at Steve Harrington's backyard. And he starts taking pictures, which is a little bit creepy. Like, I understand he's looking for his brother. But then, What does he do? Doesn't he do some, he takes a picture of Nancy while she's getting naked or something like that?
Yep.
I was just, for the first few episodes, I was like, dude, like, I don't know about this guy. So, yeah.
Oh yeah, didn't Steve break the camera because he found out about the pictures?
Yeah. He was super pissed. I forget if it was Steve that found out or his, like, flunky friends or whatever, the other bullies.
Yeah.
But he broke his camera. Can you imagine, like, in the 80s, for a kid who doesn't make a lot of money, how much that shit cost for him? How much would you have probably had to save up for that?
Probably more than a few paychecks.
So the next part I want to talk about before more plot is just the phenomenon that is Stranger Things. I mean, I watched the first 2 episodes like the day or two after it came out just because like within the first few hours people started talking about this show. And surprisingly, I finished it before Pat even started it.
I didn't watch it at first. It took about 2 months. People kept telling me about it, but, you know, with work and everything, I just didn't have the time. And then one day I had off, I sat down and I breezed through it the whole day.
You just took one day off and you were like...
Yeah, it was amazing. I was actually mad at myself for not watching it earlier.
Yeah. My dad, he came in, I was on like episode 2. He's like, what are you watching? I was like, it's this show called Stranger Things. It's just like, I have no problem restarting it from I was like an hour and a half into the series already, like an episode and a half. I was just like, I'll start it over again. We literally watched like 3 or 4 episodes the one night. And then the next day I watched the other 4 episodes with them. Do you remember like all the merch that came out just when the first season hit?
It was crazy.
Like they knew the show was going to be huge or something like that. Probably, what's the most memorable piece of merchandise you saw when it came out?
Probably the vinyl records for the original soundtrack.
Yeah, you got me that's why you remember it.
Yeah.
I remember guys dressing up in 11 costumes. They had the little dresses on. Dudes with like beards and stuff like that, so it looked super weird. They had their box of Eggos. I loved it, man. It was such a phenomenon. I saw people dressed up as Joyce Byers, like with all the Christmas lights tangled around them and such. So as we move the story along, we meet other sub-characters like, what were those bullies' names that terrorized the gang?
Troy and James, and they're just complete assholes.
Yeah. They make fun of Dustin's like dental chromium dysplasia or whatever the hell he calls that. I'm forgetting. What is he making? He makes him do some like trick like he's a trained monkey or something, right?
Yeah, he makes like he goes like this and his arms crack and it sounds pretty gross.
I mean, my knuckles only crack when I do that. Like
Mr. Clark, who is the kid science teacher and head of the AV club.
We see them hang out a lot, not in a creepy way or anything like that. But I think maybe it's because he doesn't have kids and maybe he sees potential in these guys.
Yeah, I guess because they're really into science and like stuff like that, just like him. So I guess he sees himself in them. Martin Brenner.
Papa?
He's basically the head scientist at the lab in Hawkins. He's doing all these government experiments on God knows what.
But one thing we do know is he's directly linked to everything strange happening in Hawkins.
There's a lot of other supporting characters. Mike's family, which is basically the perfect family of 5.
Dustin's parents aren't really shown this season. Joyce is a single mom and her ex-husband Lonnie lives in Indianapolis, and this guy is such a douche to Will.
Oh yeah, dude, I hated him from the start. He called Will a queer and other hateful things like that.
I think it's good though that shows use hateful words in that way because it's the 80s and it's depicting what real life was like in the 80s and what stuff was kind of thrown around that way because you can't sugarcoat certain things like that, and it's good because it makes you hate the character who's saying it even more.
Anyways, we don't really get introduced to Lucas's family until season 2, unless you count them being in the background of Will's supposed funeral.
Wait, were they?
They were, but it was not the same actors.
I'll elaborate on that in a bit, but for now I want to talk about the different aspects of the show that really stood out to me. Well, first obviously is the cast. A lot of these stars in this show, they haven't moved on or anything, but they've also starred in huge blockbusters. You have your boy Finn Wolfhard. What was he in?
He was in It, both chapters 1 and 2.
Love them.
In the horror movie that we saw.
The Turning?
Yes, that's it.
Yeah, The Turning. And he's going to be in the new Ghostbusters Afterlife movie.
Yep, can't wait for that.
Millie Bobby Brown, she was in the Godzilla film that came out not too long ago. She was in Enola Holmes. And she's going to be in Godzilla vs. Kong, I believe. Ooh. David Harbour plays Hopper. He was in the Suicide Squad. I barely noticed him because he had like a nice suit. He was clean shaven. But then I did remember they showed flashback scenes with him like that. He was also in Hellboy, which didn't turn out too well. And he plays Red Guardian in the new Black Widow movie, whenever that's going to come out. Joe Keery, who plays Steve, he has a new movie coming out called Free Guy, the one with Ryan Reynolds about the video game universe. And what's the other movie that I wanted to check out with you?
Spree?
Spree, yeah. I think it's like a found footage movie or something like that. He drives an Uber. I have to look more into it, but I definitely need to check that out.
And you can't forget about Gaten Matarazzo being in all those Verizon commercials.
As an employee of Comcast, and you are too, we should both feel betrayed. I mean, I'm sure you and me can agree both. The cinematography was fantastic. The scenes where the Upside Down slowly started to cross over, whether it was Eleven walking by something or the Demogorgon trying to come in, you'd see all the lights flicker and the synth music started to rev up and the sound effects came in. Oh my gosh, it blended so well together.
Yeah, the nostalgia was done really well, especially the 80s synth soundtrack. And the other music at the time, like The Clash, Joy Division, The Smiths, Bowie.
Oh, yeah. And I think they definitely got the wardrobe down pretty damn well, too. I mean, I guess I'm channeling my inner John Byers right now. You even got a Stranger Things shirt on. What is that for?
Well, it's actually Silverstein, one of my favorite bands, but they did a...
Of course.
They did a rip.
Nearing the 2/3 marker of the show, there's so much that happens. 11 has all those government dudes from Hawkins' lab after her.
Hopper tries to break into the lab to find out more about Will, and then gets knocked out while investigating.
Oh yeah, then he wakes up the next day and he's going crazy. He knows some shit went down and he's pulling apart light fixtures and looking at his lamps. He knows, as a cop with his background, that somewhere in his place had to be bugged.
Yeah, I guess he knew the government wouldn't let him get away with it that easily.
Jonathan and Nancy start a friendship, and they happen to stumble upon the Upside Down just randomly in a hole in a tree.
Nightmare Before Christmas style, I guess. Obviously, Steve Harrington is jealous of the time that Jonathan and Nancy are spending together.
So much that this dude goes on the offensive, man. He says, like, Nancy the slut Wheeler spray painted on that movie theater marquee. People got away with so much more shit back then when there wasn't as many cameras.
Which then eventually leads to him and Jonathan getting into a fist fight.
I mean, you could argue Nancy started it by slapping the shit out of him, but yeah. Jonathan was just sitting there quietly for like 2 minutes like, building up. So when you saw that, who was your money on?
Steve, and then I quickly regretted my bet.
We get more of Eleven's backstory, and she shows off more of her telepathic powers, especially the one scene has to be one of my favorites in the middle school.
Where she forces Troy to piss his pants.
Yeah, Troy pisses his pants by the hands of 11 in front of the whole elementary school. If that happened to me, I would just have to transfer schools.
Lastly, the kids inquire to Mr. Clark about how alternate dimensions work.
Nearly the finale. And I'll ask you this and let you go first, Pat. What character resonated with you the most? Like, if you were to imagine yourself as one of those kids, who are you closest to?
Probably Will, because he's, the social outcast, even among the outcasts.
Yeah, the head dork of the group, almost.
Yeah. My dad didn't resent me like his did, but I felt like my parents just didn't understand me when I was a teenager.
As for the character that resonated with me the most, it's so hard because Jonathan, to some extent, not because I was mopey or depressed or anything like that, but his style, obviously, you can see... His music taste, though, rock music, punk music, but if it was a specific character just based on personality trait, I'd probably go with Lucas, because Lucas butts heads all the time with Mike, try to do their whole alpha male thing, and eventually leads to them splitting, and Lucas is fine just doing his own thing for a bit. I do a lot of my own stuff. I hang out, watch TV on my own. I don't mind vacationing or hiking by myself. And just like Lucas and Mike, I had a friend like that in real life, so that's why I really related to him. And when he's off doing his own thing, he's getting shit done too. He's investigating stuff and finding information to bring to the group. I feel like sometimes I do that. Like, there's a lot of stuff I know you guys will ask me, but you don't think I paid attention, but I actually do. Not that, like, talk up myself or anything like that, but I know this has been interesting. It was like, damn, how do you remember that? And I remember weird shit too. I have mad ADD, so I don't know how I remember that stuff. So, the final few episodes.
The boys get 11 to communicate with the Upside Down and try to find Will. She uses a sensory deprivation chamber.
Steve, after the fight with Jonathan, I think everyone realized he was a douchebag, and I'm happy he finally realized it too, so much that he dropped his 2 douchey best friends, thank God, and tries to make things right with Nancy. By the end of the season, he just becomes a better person, so much that he confronts the Demogorgon with Jonathan and Nancy and swings at it with that, Jonathan's like Negan bat. They trap the Demogorgon and save the day. Well, part of it at least.
Hopper and Joyce find the wormhole to the Upside Down in Hawkins' lab's basement. They enter inside, and after a little bit of looking, they find Will and extract him.
That scene made me cringe so much. So, like, little things with shows, like, if you have someone's arm getting cut off or something, or their head blowing up, that's fine. But the part where one of the Demogorgons, like, or tree vines was down his throat.
Was down his throat and they had to pull it out.
I'm not going to make any more emotions because that'll look sexual, but... yeah, it's this... I hate stuff like... I can only imagine what that would have been like. Lastly, we find out that Jonathan, Steve, and Nancy didn't really kill the Demogorgon. And it goes to Hawkins Middle School to confront 11.
Yeah, Elle banishes the creature, but in doing so, she mysteriously vanishes into thin air.
I believe it's the next day, or maybe even later that night, Will awakens in a hospital bed, and everything seems fine, but they fast forward a month later, and he just goes to the bathroom and coughs up like a mutated slug or something.
Yep.
And then he gets a glimpse into the Upside Down, so you know there's like some part latching onto him still. Which I was kind of bummed about, because he wasn't really himself the whole season, because that's hinting to me that he's still not going to be his normal self in season 2. Something's going to be wrong with him, and I want to see what the actual Will Byers is like.
Steve gets back together with Nancy because he totally redeems himself.
Yeah, that's right. And Hopper seems to be up to something sketchy by the end of the season. I guess we'll talk about that for the next season. Pat's definitely coming back for that. In the end, after everything's said and done, who was your favorite character?
Mike, because, you know, he's the leader. He's the one that cares most about finding Will, it seems. I mean, they all do, but he seems to be the most protective of him.
He was protective as hell with 11, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah,
so that's why he was getting into arguments with Lucas. Because, like...
there was a girl becoming in between.
I've definitely done this to you, and I feel bad because... I've chosen girls over Pat before sometimes, whether it's hanging out. I know you've probably done that to me too inadvertently, but
probably,
that's life. And obviously for me, my favorite's going to be Steve the Hare Harrington, just because he's such a cool dude. He completely does a 180, and I don't know if that shit was planned or not, because I feel like it would have to have been something like he went in for a screen test and they cast him as the bully, but as they went along filming the show, maybe, I know that would have been a lot of rewriting, but... I feel like so many people loved him that they just gave him that redeeming arc, and that's just what made it that much more meaningful to me. Probably one of the biggest redeeming arcs I've ever seen in television history. I know there was something else I wanted to talk about.
The CGI.
Yeah. The CGI and the practical effects. Just, once the show starts out, you see that guy being snatched up in the laboratory. As the show goes on, though, I feel like a lot of stuff is practical. Like, there's a scene where... there's a van chasing the kids down the road, and 11 uses her telepathic powers to lift it up. And it looks like they literally crashed a van for that scene instead of using CGI. And I know that Demogorgon, for a bit too, in the first season, was actually a guy in a suit.
Yep.
Was there any CGI or practical effects that really stood out to you?
Yeah, well, in the behind-the-scenes book, Worlds Turned Upside Down, they explained that they actually did launch a van over and then, you know, digitally put it in there.
So it's like they kind of... filmed the van launching like in a warehouse or something, then put it in the actual scene.
And then, you know,
so technically speaking, they did crash it, just not on an actual street.
Not on the actual
That's
street.
fair enough. And another thing for me, the makeup was on point too. When John and Steve are duking it out and you see Steve's busted up eye afterwards, they did a hell of a job on that. Props to the makeup department. So... I'm just going to turn it over to Pat for the final thoughts area. Is there anything you wanted to touch upon or talk about before we end this?
Dr. Martin Brenner, or as 11 likes to call him, Papa.
Oh, yeah, that guy.
The creators have said he might not be dead.
Even though, the Demogorgon pounced on him, right?
Yeah, but they never show a body. So, anything's possible.
Yeah, I guess they could do something with that in season 4. For me, I was always hopeful that they showed that scene with Mr. Clark and he's watching the thing with the Asian woman.
Yeah.
And I was just like, hey, good for him. She looks way out of his league. But unfortunately, I don't see him with her in future seasons. So I guess Dustin was the cock block of the night with that.
Yeah, since he kept calling him.
But wrapping this up, huge shock of how impactful the first season was when it came out. Great CGI and practical effects, relatable issues, and I wanted to say the families in this show were also relatable. You had Will and Jonathan Byers, single mom. Dad was a douchebag. As you were touching upon earlier, Mike's family was like the perfect family. Dustin, you didn't really hear too much from his parents, and the same with Lucas, even though they showed him briefly. But it kind of relates to a lot of different people because there's people who live with single parents or perfect families, so to speak. And that's what I kind of like. So it shows all the families' different lifestyles and how those characters could be affected growing up. That does about wrap it up for me. I'll let Pat score it first.
For the first season, I give it a 9.5.
You know what? I'm probably right on the money with Pat, too. There's a few teeny tiny minor things that I didn't like that I touched upon, but all in all, yeah, 9.5. So thanks for stopping by, Pat.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Looking forward to talking about season 2. Thanks for watching, guys.